Speaking of changes, I want to change this game like I'm losing in Madden 30-6. Like that, y'all. Some people, they fiend for things they've already seen. I think they wanted me to be like that, y'all. But it wasn't my scene. I started doing these things that made them say they can't do it like that, y'all. Hell no, they can't do it like that, y'all. Hell no, they can't do it like
Hello,
that,
Spokane listeners. Before we get into today's episode, I want to tell you all about an exciting project that's really special to me. It is the Real Rat 2.0 Seed and Spark campaign. My friend, Spokane podcaster, and local filmmaker Lou Caruso unveiled his debut pilot episode of Real Rat last year, and now he's back with a bigger vision. It's Real Rat 2.0, and it aims to create a genuine, relatable basketball series based here in Spokane, Hooptown, USA. The story's still following Funky, aka Frank, an aging athlete navigating life in basketball, and is packed with local flavor and passion. And this time, Luke and the Real Rat team are crowdfunding to produce a remastered, expanded pilot episode, and they need your help to reach $20,000 on Seed and Spark. And by contributing, you're supporting local talent and helping bring this authentic sports dramedy to life. Plus, there are awesome rewards for all the backers. So head over to seedandspark.com/fund/realrat or find the link in the show description to donate today. Please, let's help support local filmmakers and celebrate Spokane's basketball culture together. Have one other little ad read for you. Spokecast is not the only personal podcast that I do. I am also one half of your favorite 90s duo from the Super 90s Brothers. It's a podcast that I've been doing with my friend Adam Pitzler since 2017. And I've got some seriously exciting news today that goes along with the guest today, kind of, and that they both happen at the Lilac City Comic-Con. Adam and I are packing our fanny packs and we're heading straight there to the Lilac City Comic-Con at the Spokane Convention Center, where we will be podcasting live on June 2nd. That's right. We're diving headfirst into a siege of nostalgia surrounded by over 250 exhibitors, artists, professional guests. It's like stepping into a time machine and landing smack dab into your favorite decade or favorite comic book, or you name it. They have all the nostalgia and pop culture there. But that's not all. Me and Adam aren't just going to be there at the convention. We are going to be doing a live version of the show, and we're going to be covering the 1989 classic, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. But wait, there's more. It will be with none other than Amy O'Neill herself, Amy Zielinski from Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. And we're going to just talk all about the movie, talk nostalgia about it, and she's going to join us and be a part of the Super 90s Brothers / sister. So go get your tickets at Lilac City Comic-Con today and join us in good old Spokane, Washington. Visit www.lilaccitycon.com and get your tickets. Well, let's get into the show now. What is up, Lilac City, and welcome back to Spokecast. I have a very special podcast for you today. Today on the podcast is Dmitrious Bistrevskyi, better known as Darth Dmitrious. He is a Ukrainian-American actor and a circus artist renowned for his flexibility and movement talents. He stands at 6'7" and is probably most recognized for his role as a suit actor for Darth Vader from the Disney Plus series Obi-Wan Kenobi. On today's episode, we get into his roots here in Spokane to landing on one of the most iconic roles in movie, TV history. And I got to say, Dmitrious' journey is nothing short of inspiring. And we get into all of that, from talking about his early days, like I said, in here in Spokane, to the intense preparation he did for playing Vader and the highs and lows of his acting career. And trust me, it is a great story. The episode is almost 2 hours. I think it is around 2 hours, actually. But this is such a deep dive into a very just unique person that came from our city of Spokane, Washington. You know, like, it just goes to show, like, there are so many people here in our city that are doing so many cool things. Like, how many people knew that the person in the suit playing Darth Vader in the latest Obi-Wan Kenobi was actually from Spokane, Washington. I didn't know that until Nathan O'Brien at Lilac City Comic Con told me, and asked me if he should be on the show. And I said, yes, let's interview him. So this was such a fun conversation. Please do not skip it. And it's good. Yeah, it's so cool. And Dmitrious is such an amazing person. I want to tell you all, you should go see him this weekend at Lilac City Comic Con. He will be there Saturday and Sunday at his booth, signing autographs, meeting people. He also will be having his own panel at Lilac City Comic Con on June 1st, Saturday, on the main stage at 1 p.m. It's titled Darth Vader is from Spokane, and he will be doing a lightsaber demonstration and doing a panel. It's going to be a ton of fun. I hope to see you all there, and please enjoy this episode of Spokecast. But before we do that, I still got to shout out to my Patreon supporters, and they are Jonathan Weiser, Louis Garcia, Nathan O'Brien, Pia Hollenberg, Gina Campbell, Enrique de la Novelle, Joe Williamson, Joe Van Voorhis, Elizabeth Geyer, Abby Pointer, Tyler Poole, Judy Pointer, Amber Sparks, Luke Baumgarten, Valerie Ozier, Nick Spanger, and Elizabeth and Bill Pointer. Thank you all again so much for being Spokastanites. If you want to support what I'm doing here, visit patreon.com/Spokecast. Well, I will not keep you any longer. Here is Darth Dmitrious. Go see him this weekend at Lilac City Comic Con. This is Spokecast. Thank you so much, Dmitrious Bistrevskyi, for coming on Spokecast. This was put together kind of by Nathan O'Brien, who's the founder and originator of the con, and we wanted to get this podcast up so we could just talk about you and being from Spokane and what you're doing currently and just everything in between. So thank you so much for coming on Spokecast.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Awesome. I should ask, like, do you do a lot of podcasts? I can't believe this. I wouldn't believe this is your first one, right?
No, this is definitely not my first one.
Perfect.
I did quite a few after the show came out.
Okay.
I did quite a few after the show came out.
Yeah. So grew up in Spokane. You came here with your family when you were 2 years old, correct?
Yep. So I didn't come straight to Spokane. I went to Tacoma first.
Okay.
And I lived my first 5 years in Tacoma, and then I went to first grade in Spokane.
Awesome. So basically your early childhood memories are from, like, do you remember being in Tacoma at all?
No, not at all. I only remember Spokane.
And so when you got to Spokane, what part of town did you grow up in?
I grew up in Hilliard.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm one of the Hilliard stories. I grew up in Hilliard, maybe a mile from the river.
Oh, nice.
So I would run down to the river as a kid. I mean, but you remember, at least my childhood back then was we just kind of walked around and did whatever you wanted. So we would walk for miles, and when one of the places we'd walk to was the river. We'd go and we'd swim in the river and catch crawdads. Yeah.
That's so cool. I mean, so you lived over by, so you lived in Hilliard, but how close to the river did you live?
I lived by Market, like Euclid and Market. Around there. So it was not quite there. I was maybe like 5 blocks from there. I lived on Lacey. So basically, you'd have to climb the ridge, climb down the hill, go over the railroad tracks, go a little bit through the fields, and then you'd end up at the river.
That's awesome. I live actually I live in Millwood, but I live on Upriver Drive.
Okay.
And
so I moved to Millwood afterwards.
Oh, okay.
When I moved to West Valley, I moved off of Argonne. Yeah.
That's so cool. Yeah. So early childhood memories of going to the river. That's so cool. The river is so important in Spokane, and I feel like there's a lot of people that have core memories of going to the river. What else were you into as a young Dmitrious in Spokane, Washington?
I was obsessed with medieval sword fighting with my younger brother, so I kind of roped him into it. He was into archery and I was into fighting, so I would just carve swords out of sticks and we'd fight in our backyard. And we had this old refrigerator. For some reason, there was this old refrigerator that was in our backyard. It was probably there for a few months before we disposed of it. And we would sit on the refrigerator and we would hide our swords inside the refrigerator. And so we'd sit on top of the refrigerator and carve swords, and we'd hide our swords. And then of course,
you had to hide them from your parents.
oh yeah. After a certain point, there was an incident where my brother threw a javelin, which was just a sharp stick, at this like target sign that I was supposed to hold, but it's made out of cardboard, and it went through the cardboard and went right above my eye.
Oh,
But it was like half a centimeter above my eye, where it was like if it was just a little bit lower, I'd be blind.
oh my gosh.
But it cut me above the eye, and it was bleeding everywhere. And then it was like, it's because of the swords. And then there was a ban on swords.
That's funny. My brother threw multiple things at me and my other brother, and I definitely have scars to prove it. That's great having brothers to like just give you everlasting memories. So you're also 6'7" grade, 6'8" ish.
Yeah, 6'7", 6'7".
So were you already really tall when you were young? So we're like,
I was always the tall lumbering kid.
yeah.
So I never like had this major growth spurt. I was just always a head taller than everyone else. There's like this photo from Tacoma from kindergarten where we're stacking blocks and I'm stacking the top block, and the teacher, as a joke, tilted the camera down so the top of my head is cut off. But I'm in kindergarten, so I'm like, I don't know, 2 feet tall. I don't know how tall you were back then, but it was just to show how tall I was. Jerk move, but
that is. I mean, so you always just kind of stuck out? You're always the tall guy.
I was always the tall guy, but I always had a very young face.
Oh, okay.
So
yeah.
I looked very young, but I was very tall. And my older brother is 3 years older than me, and we were the same height.
Oh wow.
My entire childhood, yeah.
Being that Spokane is also known as like Hoop Town, did you ever get into basketball, anything like that?
I resisted basketball with such a passion because everyone wanted me to play basketball.
Oh, I'm sure.
And I've always been this rebel at heart. So I was obsessed with breakdancing.
Oh.
And the coaches tried to recruit me to play basketball, and I was part of the multicultural club at Rogers. I was part of the breakdance club. So I went and actually performed at the school. I wasn't good, but I enjoyed it.
I was going to ask about breakdancing because it's on the bio for Lilac City Comic Con and everything. I was like, breakdancing is kind of I know a couple people within the like community here, and I couldn't imagine seeing like a 6'7" guy trying to breakdance, but that's awesome. I always wanted to break. I'm only 6'1", so but I always wanted to breakdance. I never could get it, but I'm sure you were a sight.
Well, there's actually a funny story about that. So that was in high school. I started breakdancing a little bit. And then I used to coach gymnastics at Spokane Gymnastics.
Oh yeah.
And one of the other coaches was a b-boy. And he was auditioning for So You Think You Could Dance. And this was already when I was starting to do theater and I was starting to go to auditions, and I had this deep primal fear of auditions. And I had this time when I once froze in an audition. And then I hated myself for so long for not being able to deliver. So afterwards, I made like the statement that I'm just going to audition for everything, even if it doesn't apply, to get the jitters out of the way and to not be scared of it. So he was auditioning for So You Think You Could Dance, and he's like, hey, you want to come with me and audition? And I was like, I don't dance. And he's like, it's okay, I'll teach you. We got 3 months. There's time. I was like, okay, yeah. So he convinces me. 2 months go by, nothing. Crickets, not a word. And then about 3 weeks before we go, he's like, okay, so we're doing this, right? And I was like, no, we haven't practiced. We haven't done anything. And he's like, it's okay, we'll start now. So for 3 weeks, I trained very intensely in breakdancing, b-boying. And then I went with him to Seattle and auditioned for So You Think You Could Dance. And I did absolutely terrible. And it aired on TV. And I had forgotten about it. So like it takes about 3 months from the experience to when it's aired. So I was like, the judges tore me apart. I came back with like this fury passion because one of them told me that I would never be good.
Oh.
But I was bad. I was legitimately bad.
Yeah.
And at that time, so I came back with this passion, and him and I formed a breakdance crew called Paper Cutout Crew. And we were the 2 founding members, and then we found other friends, and then we became one of the biggest crews in Spokane, the PCC. This was about 12, 13 years ago.
That's so cool. I as a quick aside, do you happen to know a guy named Hector Izon?
Yeah, of course. Hector's one of the founding members.
Oh, is he really? What's funny?
So Hector is one of my crewmates. We used to call him Zeroni. His b-boy name was Zeroni.
Yeah.
And my b-boy name was Bionicle. and we were
Oh,
in the same crew.
that's so cool. Oh my gosh. No, Hector's been on Spokecast before. He actually came into the studio about 3 months ago and did some he's an amazing photographer here in Spokane.
Yeah.
You should definitely connect with him when he's here, when you're here, so you can get so Hector can get some shots of you. That's such a, I love the Spokane connections. That's so cool.
I think the coolest thing would be if we could get some of PCC to show up to the con and us
Oh,
do like an exhibition perform. I mean, none of us have danced in like 10 years, but
that's not
that'd be a
true.
fun.
Hector's back. He's been posting some reels of him getting back into doing some breakdancing. I think he still does it weekly, and has his crew, and he has like younger kids coming in to teach them. He's very much about the culture and making sure that it's keeping it going here in Spokane.
That's awesome.
Um,
Yeah. So he's one of the founding members of PCC. There's four of us.
that's so
It was
cool.
David Lee, Hector, Tucker Fry, and myself.
Okay.
We created the dance crew. Yeah.
That's cool. So where did this you so you like you had sorry, excuse me. You had stage fright, or you had like that you wanted to break through that, like is that like how you got into acting, or were you always like interested in theater as a young kid, and you just didn't like the auditioning part? Like where did the love for acting and all the theatrics come from?
I used to do like church plays.
Mm.
So that was like my first introduction, but the bar was very low. You show up, you sign up, you get the part. There's
Hmm.
very little auditioning, and you do it. And even you don't necessarily have to be good. You just have to show up and want to be good and
Right.
want to do your best. And I enjoyed that aspect of it, and it was something that I wanted. I kind of in the back of my mind that would be cool if I did that.
Mm.
And then when I was coaching gymnastics, I had this great epiphany because I would do these warm-up questions with the kids, and you ask them like, "What do you want to be when you grow up? If you were on a deserted island and could only bring three things or whatever," you always have like this conversation starter to
Yeah.
get people talking in the beginning, especially at the start of a new session. And one of the questions is, "What would you want to be when you grow up?"
Hmm.
And like at 6 and 7, every one of them was like, "I'm going to be an astronaut. I'm going to be a movie star. I'm going to be a famous director. I'm going to be a composer, a musician, a dancer, whatever." But these really extravagant dreams. And then you hit about like 10, 11, 12, and they're like, "I'm going to be an electrician because my father says it's stable work." And then I'm like, "What happened? Like what happened in like 5 years? It changes from this is my dream to this is what is practical for me and my environment."
Right.
Right. So as I started noticing this, I was questioning myself, well, what do I, and at the time I had a janitorial company, a floor maintenance company. So
Mm.
I would do all the buffing and waxing at all the Dollar Trees, all the Michaels, one of the Les Schwabs, and I would clean the carpets at the movie theaters.
Oh wow.
So I had like a mini company, and then I coached part-time as a hobby. And at that time I said, well, what would I do?
Mm.
I'm technically successful right now in Spokane, uh, but what do I want to do?
Mm.
Like if I could change something, what would I do? And
Oh.
then the little voice in my head said, well, you've always wanted to act. And I said, okay. So, and then that inspired me to enroll back to SEC because I had dropped out, to
Mm.
enroll back into SEC, finish my associated business degree, and then and at the time I started doing theater, and
Yeah.
I started auditioning locally, roughly at that time too. So I started auditioning for small things. Spokane doesn't get too much stuff, but we have like little indie projects and at the time it wasn't short films, but it was like YouTube series and things like
Mm.
that.
Okay.
So I'm auditioning for these things, and I did my first play at SCC. And at the time, I'm also breakdancing. So the crew is moving. We're training 6 days a week. We're training very intensely, and I'm loving gymnastics too because I wasn't a gymnast. I started as an adult.
Hmm.
So
Oh
I'm training gymnastics and breakdancing simultaneously and doing theater. And I was like, I enjoy this storytelling aspect, but I also enjoy moving my body. And
mm.
I'm now starting to unlock coordination. Before it was awkward, and now I'm unlocking some form of coordination.
Wow.
So then I was like, I know I'm going to pursue something in entertainment that fuses storytelling and movement. And
Wow.
at the time, I didn't know what that was, and I wasn't as confident in my acting ability. So I said, I know I'll move to LA, I'll pursue stunts, I'll get into the industry that way, and then once I meet people, I'll figure out how to become an actor. And that was the plan.
Wow, that's so cool. Like I love that you were just hustling and you had a vision and you just went for it, because I feel like so many people, they have that vision and they do what they say. Like I'm going to become an electrician, or I'm going to, be do that, they don't go for it. And that is such a testament to like where you're at now. And I am so excited to get into like what you're doing now. um and but before we do that, I do want to break it up, and I want to play a quick little game. We're
Okay.
going to play the Spokecast Hot List. It's a name association game. I'm going to say a word, and you're going to say the first word that comes to your mind as it relates to Spokane. And the first question I always ask is, or the first word I always say is park.
I'm gonna throw a curveball and say Manitou Park.
Oh, that's probably number 2 on this list. If I aggregated all the answers, but Manitou's amazing. Coffee.
Uh, my parents used to own a coffee shop. It used to be called Zoomies before. It was called Zoomies, I think, when we had it.
Oh,
So I'm
really?
gonna say Zoomies. Yeah.
Where was that at?
It was on it's perpendicular to Argonne. Trent. It was on Trent.
Oh, okay.
In between SCC and Argonne.
Oh, okay. That's amazing. Burger.
Zips.
I was gonna say you lived close. You probably live close to the Zips on I forget, is it Cochrane and Market.
Yeah. That was my first introduction to my first date was at Zips.
Oh, really? That's awesome.
I was like I don't know, in 5th grade.
Oh, you're in 5th grade and you go and
Yeah.
that's an awesome date. um Sweet treats. This can be like candy, donuts, you name it.
I'm gonna say C's candy.
Hmm. Uh Breakfast or brunch? Like not which one, but like where at.
This is gonna be a weird one, but I'm gonna pick Denny's. Because I did all of my back then they had free Wi-Fi and free coffee. I mean, if you get refills, and I would study at Denny's and Sherry's all through college. So I
That's
was
a
there almost every day.
That's so true. I forget about how easy it was to get internet, how hard it was to get internet back in the day. Like if you ever wanted to do anything, you had to go to like a Starbucks, or I mean, I remember, yeah, you it's weird to think about where we're at now. Like we're obviously like on Wi-Fi or whatever right now. And I think we take it for granted, because yeah, back in the 2000s, if you wanted to do any homework online, you had to go somewhere.
Yeah. And also they were very nice to me. So like I would sit there for like 5 hours.
Oh, wow.
And that's why I say breakfast, because I'd have like 2 or 3 meals and I'd be there just studying, especially around finals time. And they'd give
Yeah.
me a booth and they already knew me and they're like, okay, he's not gonna order much, but he's gonna be here and keep to himself. And I would just study for like 6 hours or 7 hours.
That's awesome. Neighborhood.
I'm gonna say Hilliard. Hilliard was the first place that I walked. Like I walked every part of Hilliard as a
Mm.
kid, or rode a bike within maybe like a 3 mile radius of where I live.
Where were the hot spots for you?
I mean, it was always parks
Hmm.
for sure, but also at that time it was the mall,
Mm.
Northtown Mall. So we'd
Yeah,
walk to Northtown Mall. There was also a phase of climbing fences and going into construction sites and doing all this other stuff. So there's endless construction sites to explore.
definitely.
Um, yeah, there was a lot of that.
Uh, Pizza.
Pizza. I'm gonna say Pizzeria.
Hmm.
I don't know if they're
That,
local to Spokane, but
I,
my friends used to work there.
they might not be, but I'm if they are, they're probably only local to like the like region, like Spokane and
Yeah.
Tri-Cities and maybe Seattle. Um, Event.
Let's say Bloomsday, Hoop Fest, or Pig Out at the Park.
Have you done either? Have you ran Bloomsday?
I've never run Bloomsday. I've never done Hoop Fest, but I have been at Pig Out at the Park.
Oh, nice.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Unity at the Community. We performed. PCC
Hmm.
performed at Unity at the Community.
Oh, yeah. Oh, cool. Yeah. No, I, I've definitely been to that event. When is that you typically?
I have no idea.
Yeah. So this is kind of curated for you, but like, what about Spokane do you miss the most?
It's hard to put it into words. You don't know how good you have it.
Mm.
That's the only way to say it. You don't know how good you have it at home until you leave home,
Yeah.
right? And now that I've lived all over the world. I've
Hmm.
toured as a circus artist. I've been in so many different countries, and you understand how nice things are, and how much people take it for granted, and how little people appreciate it. Just
Yeah.
having a river, having upriver drive, having those little like rocks to climb,
Mm.
having so many little underground spots, being around nature, being around water, having so many lakes in one area.
Mm.
It's just going outside and being able to hike anywhere. There's so much uncharted territory. There's so much beautiful nature in Spokane, and until you live in a city, like when I lived in New York, and the only trees you would see were these little planter trees in between, concrete buildings, and then you go to the one park that exists in the whole city that's
Mm.
flooded with people. It's you start appreciating seeing stars. I mean, it's changed now, but
Yeah.
as I started living in bigger cities, one of the things I noticed was I don't see the stars anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, you look up
Um,
in the sky. When I was in New York, you could only see 5 stars. Uh, Literally, I would count. I could only find five because of light pollution and the clouds and everything else.
yeah.
And I'm like, and when I went to Spokane, I was like, oh wow, I remember looking up and seeing the stars. These are small little things, but yeah, it's home. It's home.
Yeah. That's so true. I don't think people to like appreciate there's with the advent of social media and being able to get online and complain about everything. You see it, I see it a lot in being that I run a podcast about Spokane, and I follow a lot of places that are about Spokane, and I just see a lot of just like negativity, and I'm just like, if you want to go see what it's like to live in like a big city like LA or New York, like by all means, like we have it. We are so lucky to be where we're
Yeah.
at here in this part of the world, especially with the nature stuff. Did you ever go get in trouble up in like Beacon Hill?
Where's Beacon Hill? You have to remind me.
Beacon Hill's like that. It's a hill that you can, if you look to the east, it's like has all the big towers on top of it by Hilliard. You would have it would have been it was like if you
Maybe.
went down Cochrane, like it was just like next to Esmeralda Golf Course, like
Oh, okay. Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I climbed everything.
Right.
Every fence that was there, I've climbed over. I went through a little hooligan stage where there was a lot of trust. When I was younger, I was obsessed with ninjas.
Mm,
Before I fell in love with Darth Vader, I was obsessed with ninjas.
mm.
And I was like 14, 15, and I bought myself a full ninja costume, the largest size that they had. I think which was the largest size was for 6'3", and at the time I was already like 6'5" or 6'4". So it was short on me. I was running around in this ninja costume that was short on me, and I bought like little ninja tools, and I would climb every fence, everything. I would rappel off of everything. I went through that phase. Yeah.
That's awesome. Um, well, I should like transitioning back to kind of Spokane and like leaving Spokane. I should ask, like, do you still have family here? Do you still come back and visit every once in a while?
Yeah. I go about once or twice a year. My parents live in Colville.
Okay.
And I have a sister and cousins who live in Spokane,
Oh,
and
nice.
plus friends. Like you grew up there, old breakdance crew. I try to pop into Spokane gymnastics because
Mm,
I always tell people that that's the place that made me, because that
yeah.
was when I had my epiphany, and I was in an environment that kind of nurtured me to be brave.
Mm,
So
yeah.
I try to pop in and always do. I'm actually here. I'm going to do a little plug.
Yeah.
I'm teaching a handstand workshop when I'm in Spokane
Awesome.
at
I'll
Spokane Gymnastics.
and so that's on June 5th, and it's $49, and beginners, all levels, intermediate. That sounds great at Spokane
Yes.
Gymnastics. My kids my daughter's done a couple of rounds of gymnastics there, and then the first thing they ever did at Spokane Gymnastics was they did like ninja training,
Oh yeah,
and that was a ton of fun to get to watch them like do all the different. I mean, it was kind of like just like a course. It was like they treated it kind of like Ninja Warrior, but it's definitely it's such a great place for kids. I know so many families that take their kids there and really make it part of their life. It's great, a great community.
yeah.
um
And when I was working there was only, I think, like 5 coaches.
oh
There was the
wow.
owner, Nadine, and then there was like four other of us, and it was we were the team. Now Spokane Gymnastics has expanded into the greatest gym in Spokane, but
Mm-hmm.
before that it was just a small team, and it was just the experience. And at the time I wasn't a gymnast,
Mm.
so I was I'll tell you like this little story. I learned how to do a really terrible backflip at Hauser Lake into the
Okay.
water.
Yeah.
And I was already like 19, 18, 19. And my
Mm-hmm.
brother's like, yeah, just jump really hard, whip your head back, and you'll do a backflip. And I'm like 6'5", 6'5",
Mm-hmm.
6'6". So at the time, it was the biggest accomplishment I had ever done in my life because I
Yeah.
never thought I would ever be able to do a backflip.
Yeah.
It wasn't a true backflip because my head is barely skipping the water and I'm landing with my torso already in the water. But I was so stoked. And at the time, I had my janitorial company. All my friends were working or in school. I had all this free time during the day and I worked at nights.
Mm-hmm.
So I was kind of looking for a hobby and I popped into Spokane Gymnastics at the time. And I was like, I asked if I could rent the gym so that I could teach myself how to backflip
Yeah.
because I was too self-conscious to train in front of people because I was so awkward and uncoordinated. And I talked to the receptionist and she said, we don't rent out the gym normally, but we could take your info and run it through management. And the head owner of the company, before Nadine Burgess purchased it, was owned by a company in Seattle. And the owner was doing maintenance next door in like a closet or something. And he overheard me talking and said, what was that man's name? Oh, Dmitrious Bistrevskyi. He must be a really good Russian gymnast. Let's call him and offer him a position to coach the boys team because we need a men's coach. So they called and offered me a position to coach the men's team. And at the time, I was like, I don't know anything about gymnastics. So I'm like, I'm actually wanting to learn. I don't know anything. I'm just this tall, like awkward guy. And
Mm-hmm.
and then Nadine was like, well, if you want, we're having these open call interviews because we're looking for coaches to interview young kids or whatever. You can at least pop in and try it out and see if you like it. And at the time, I didn't need the money or a job, but I needed something to do. So I was like, okay, I'll check it out as a hobby. And I fell in love. I fell in love with coaching and working with kids. And then I started teaching myself gymnastics. And Nadine was my coach. So she taught me how to handstand, the beginnings of how to handstand. And I fell in love with gymnastics, and that fueled into breakdancing. And that later transitioned into circus. And now I teach
Mm.
handstands. I
That's
have like
so
my own philosophy and system for handstands. Yeah.
so like this whole like beginning of you leaving Spokane to go and pursue your passion of acting, like it all originated with like dancing and gymnastics and like
Yeah.
going into like stunt coordination basically, right?
Yeah.
Wow. Like how like what was the jumping off point? Like where did you realize like I have what it takes, I just need to move down to LA and give this a shot? Like did you have like a lead going down there? Like what was the jumping off point?
It was saying yes to things I was uncomfortable with in
Yeah.
micro doses. So it was like yes to auditioning, to be a gymnastics coach. That was the most random thing I could think of, literally, that I could do at the time when I already had a career that was starting to flourish and I was already successful and everything.
Yeah.
And then after that, it was being like cultivated to grow. And like Nadine was all about trying to get people to grow and mature and self-actualize to
Mm-hmm.
become something bigger, so it was my first introduction to like empowerment and trying to be better. And then going on So You Think You Could Dance, and that was a big hurdle, a psychological hurdle of also saying yes to something I knew I was bad at, and then it aired on TV. So at that point, there was like, okay, well, I have nothing to lose. And
You're
it
right.
kept on going of like these saying yeses and kind of having these little periods of growth.
Mm.
Um, and what I realized was, in my mind, I was always the underdog. I had always started late. I didn't have any formal training. The only thing I had was determination, consistency, which was like
Mm.
a work ethic, and drive. And for me, it was just I made this contract with my younger brother. He was going to Whitworth at the time, and he was going to writing. And he wanted to be a screenwriter, and I wanted to be an actor. And I said, okay, how about once you finish school, we both move to Los Angeles together, and we do a 5-year contract. We cannot leave for 5 years. And I used the analogy of Cortez burning his ships. I said, once we leave Spokane, we can't come back. And
Mm-hmm.
whatever happens, we have to stay for 5 years.
Yeah.
And after 5 years, then we could reassess and determine whether we're going to try to stay longer or whether we're going to go home or see where life takes us. But for the first 5 years, we have to try. And so at least we could look back and say we did our best.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the roughest 5 years of my life because we
Wow.
went to LA with nothing, with no connections, no money,
Mm-hmm.
no job prospects. no skill, because the first thing I learned when I came to LA is that people are super talented.
Hmm.
You have the best in the world meeting in one place with the same common goal, competing against each other. And the
Right.
competition, and like when I used to b-boy, we would go to we became the best in Spokane, and we started traveling to Tri-Cities and to Seattle to battle, because there we would get humbled.
Mm.
Here you're the top dog, and then you go to Tri-Cities and you just get schooled so fast. Or you go to Seattle where there's so many crews where you don't even make it past the first round. Whereas in Spokane, someone from our crew would win the battle. So it was that kind of aspect. So we were always going to these places of competition. And when I moved to LA, I realized that Seattle had nothing on LA. Tri-Cities
Mm.
had nothing on LA. Like the amount that I felt that I was an underdog was so overwhelming that I went on this manic work ethic that whatever I did was 10x. If I could, I would train until I collapsed. And I built my endurance up to, there's a point where my brother and I were training 10 hours a day in circus at like LA Fitness, at like a regular gym, like a Stroh's.
Mm.
And we would train 10 hours a day just in the dance room, juggling, training handstands, flexibility, martial arts, everything, because there was no way back home. We had 5 years and we had to stick it out for 5 years. And then once that 5 years were up, we reassessed and we're like, okay, yeah, I think we have a place here.
So
But that
wait,
first 3 years were rough.
what year was it when you like left to go to LA?
Um, I don't remember. I think it was 2012 or 2011.
Okay.
2011, I think.
Wow. And so yeah, so you're training, you're you're getting basically your 10,000 hours. You're very much like,
Yeah.
you have, because yeah, I mean I could see that. Like it is like when you're in Spokane, it's easy because you're in Spokane. Most people that are good at things you're a big fish in a small pond. And then if you
Yeah.
leave and you go to LA, like it is, yeah, it's so much different. I couldn't imagine. What was a did you feel defeated when you got down there, or it sounds like it just made you want to work harder, right?
Um, you, it's you feel like you're in a tsunami.
Mm.
You're like in a wave and you're constantly getting thrashed. So the first thing, the learning curve that I first experienced was that it's very comfortable to live in Spokane, at least at
Hmm.
that time.
Yeah.
And all the complaining and all the naysaying that I did when I lived there, once I moved into a place where what I call the real world, but not the real world, but there's five of us, 5 men living in a 2-bedroom apartment, and each of us could barely make rent. And each of us were paying individually is what you could get a 1-bedroom apartment in Spokane. So what you realize is the majority of my income, 85% of my income, is just for survival. It's just to pay my rent. Food is like a back thing. Like literally there was a long period of eating spaghetti and ketchup and eating rice with everything. And you forget about eating out, you forget about going out, you forget about doing anything fun. And the only thing is I have to keep swimming. That was the kind of how it was in the beginning. And the hardest part was developing this work ethic where I'm already exhausted. I've already got back working at some terrible job so I can make rent. And now I have 5 hours of free time, and I have to use this free time to become better, because if my skills get better, then hopefully I could get better work. And if I could get better work, hopefully I could be in a more stable situation.
Mm.
That was the drive. And there was always just this struggle of constantly probably the best analogy is just swimming in the ocean. Like you're exhausted, you want to give up, but there's no land in sight, and you just keep breathing and keep doing the stroke and hoping that you move forward.
Mm.
And a big part of it was also the first like 2 years of LA is like your honeymoon period. And for a lot of people that I've encountered, the first year is like magical. You're in a new place, you have the beach, you have the sun. There's this like optimism and naivety that kind of blooms like a flower. And you're so excited about being in a new place and about the possibility, because places like Los Angeles and New York have this feeling that your entire life could change in a moment.
Mm.
You might meet the right person at the right time and your life might change completely. And there's this feeling behind it. But about year 2 and year 3 is when everyone moves back home. And for me, it was losing my friends as they were moving back home. because everyone that I knew had moved to LA to pursue a dream. And for me, it was seeing the defeat in someone's eyes when they're admitting that they can't do the thing that they set out to do. And it wasn't just one, it was like 30 people. Driving them to the airport, watching them, take their stuff out of their apartment as they go back home with their tail between their legs, saying that, hey, it's rough and maybe I want to do something else. And you see that, and that for me was the drive. And I was like, well, I know that that person goes out on the weekends, so I just won't go out on the weekends. Okay, I won't even watch Netflix. I'll just juggle, I'll just train handstands, I'll work on my coordination, I'll work on everything. And the whole thing was, what can I do to make myself a little bit better? And the whole time I had this feeling that I was this underdog. Everyone was so much more skilled, everyone was much more talented. A lot of people had connections or had resources. I couldn't even afford classes for anything. So my brother and I were watching YouTube and teaching ourselves at a local gym. Like, it was akin to Stroh's. We're basically at Stroh's learning all of our skill set from watching YouTube videos and then practicing in front of a mirror. And we did this for hours, for years. We were at the same LA Fitness for like 5 years. Yeah, and then one day I looked around and suddenly I was one of the best. And that transitional period I never saw that transitional period. I was an underdog and then I wasn't.
Huh. Well, I should ask, where did the underdog mentality come from? Like, is this like upbringing? Like, it was this like
No.
Yeah,
It was because everyone that I knew had some kind of formal training. So the underdog mentality and the underdog was a place of empowerment, because it was staring at something that was impossible and still doing it anyways. Whereas, and that was the nice part, was that I got humbled so fast that I knew what the other competition was. I knew exactly what the other competition was, and I knew that I wasn't up to par with it. And that was the underdog mentality. Like, I'm teaching myself martial arts, and there's a seasoned martial artist. The difference is like night and day. Or I'm teaching myself handstands, and there's a gymnast or someone who grew up doing it since they were 4, and I started at 19. So that's the difference. Is even though if I train 3 hours a day, they've trained 3 hours a day for 15 years. And I'm playing catch up.
Yeah.
So that was the underdog mentality, and also just not having any resources or connection, not having not knowing anybody, not having any specific skill set. So I thought I was really coordinated because I was the tallest person I knew who could move. Right. And then I met many people just like me in LA, and then I had to become better. So I came with a little bit of ego of like, I thought this was like, I get in there day one, get off the plane, meet someone like, wow, you breakdance? Because at the time I was doing power, so I could do windmills and I could do a lot of like power stuff that tall people couldn't do. So I thought I'd meet someone at my first battle, be like, oh wow, you breakdance? Here's this job opportunity, and then done. That was my trajectory, but that wasn't the case at all. It was this uphill battle the whole time, and then you fall in love with the grind. You fall in love with the growth, your inner growth, and the validation has to be an inner validation of like, I showed up as hard as I could today, and that was it. And that was the mantra every single day until finally, literally, you look around and now you're the person teaching people, and now you're the best in multiple skill sets in the industry, and that's how I got there.
Yeah. What was your first like big break in LA?
I got recruited into circus school. My whole motto in life has been kind of just saying yes to these very like outlandish circumstances and opportunities. And a lot of them should have been like offhand things that most people would just decline. And because I've explored these avenues, my life has gone through a very interesting path where I became a professional circus artist, and I worked for Cirque du Soleil, and then I performed on Broadway in the Broadway musical Pippin. I toured the States with Pippin. And then I got to do some more acting stuff, and I got to play Darth Vader. So those were like my big career highlights.
Right.
But I guess my first big break was I got tapped in the union to do a stunt job where I was doubling Blake Griffin, a basketball player.
Yeah.
So that was my first ever stunt job. And at the time I was training circus, and I didn't know any stunt people, and I was the right place at the right time, met the right person, and I got into that job. My next big break was I worked on Night at the Museum 3 in Canada, because there was this certain sweep that they wanted that no one else in Canada could do. So basically the rules are they have to audition all the local people first, and if they can't find someone, then they could fly someone in. There was like a specific sweep that they wanted, and it had to be my size, and I was doing motion capture for a Greek statue. And that was my first break of having a form of validation of like, wow, I've done something where the people in Canada couldn't do at the time. The level right now is much higher than, and it was the network of the coordinator looking for people of who he knew, but I was the tallest person that he encountered who could do it. And I got flown in, and that was one of the most pivotal moments. Yeah, I think.
Did you when you got to LA, did you find like someone, did you find a management company? Like did you go down that route like pretty quickly, or did that take time as well?
Everything took time. Yeah, you find, so you come to LA, and LA has this underlying predatory vibe that most people don't see. But there's always 100 suckers who are willing to part with their money, and there's enough people in Los Angeles to exploit them from every avenue, from every single avenue, from management, from acting classes, from every single avenue. There's always someone who's looking for someone who's naive and to take. And I fell for it in the beginning. In the very beginning, I had like management that you had to pay for and things like that. And then eventually you learn real quick, and you warn other people, and then they fall through the same pitfall.
Yeah.
It's like a rite of passage of moving to Los Angeles, because you move with this passion, and you're like, I'm gonna fulfill my dream. I just sold all my things. I just graduated college. I did whatever, and now I'm moving to Los Angeles. And some people have a little bit of savings, and they don't have much direction, and then they find these online advertisements, billboards or whatever, that turn out to be a scam more than anything. So I had that in the beginning. And then afterwards, it was just working on my skill set, and then gradually getting better agency, and then a better agency, and then more rapport, and then people knew who I was, and I was starting getting referred for work. But it was a very slow build. Yeah.
Yeah. So like then you're doing like Circus Soleil, and you're doing like did you say you were also doing stunt coordination a little bit, or like doing stunt work?
So I moved to learn stunt work.
Oh,
right.
okay.
And I had a plan. I had a master plan.
Okay.
Step one. My strengths were movement. So if I get really good at movements, then I could break in through the stunt industry.
Gotcha.
And then the idea was that once I was in the stunt industry, I could start meeting people, and I could start figuring out how to transition to acting. But the plan was always acting. And then so I just started off going through stunts. But right when I moved to LA, I got recruited into circus school. And then I fell in love with circus, because circus for me was everything that I was looking for in the film industry. I found in circus. It was storytelling. It was using my body. It was self-expression. It was art. So it was the fusion of gymnastics and breakdancing and theater all into one thing, plus the creativity to create my own work.
Right.
So I fell in love with circus, and I trained circus full time, and I said, okay, I'm loving this right now. I'm going to take a break and pursue only this. And by doing this, any skills that I learn with coordination will just help me in the future. If I happen to get more flexible or more coordinated, it will just give me an advantage later in stunts and later in acting or action acting or whatever path I pursue. So I did that, and then I auditioned for the best circus school, which was in Montreal. So I flew in, I came there, and I had done circus for about 1.5 years, and I realized how good everyone was. It was like I went there, and this is the best school in the world, and everyone is at Cirque du Soleil level, and I'm not. And I somehow made it through the rounds based on uniqueness, just having enough different tally boxes to make it all the way through. And I watched people who were significantly better than me from all over the world get cut. And finally, I made it through, and I got into school. And when I moved to Montreal and like forfeited my apartment and sold my things, I had issues with my visa, so I couldn't actually go to school. So then I was stranded in Canada with no money, and I didn't want to go back home because I had just done a fundraiser to move there.
Oh my
and
gosh.
I had sold all my things, and now I'm in Canada and I'm stranded. And I'm like, I know I have to be here for some reason. I just don't know what it is. And then one of the coaches from the school found out about it, and he trained me for free, Rocky style, in the park. And he trained me for about 2.5 months. I'd wake up in the morning, he would teach me philosophy and Russian. And the big turning point was just that I understood Russian. But I understood Russian at like a first grade level, in between a kindergarten and first grade level. I didn't understand 75% of what he said, because he's
Wow.
speaking philosophy, he's speaking theory, he's speaking body mechanics, all of this really like abstract things. And my vocabulary is like whatever I picked up going to a Russian church and whatever I picked up in regular conversation. But I don't know anything about body mechanics or theory or technique or anything. I don't even know these words. So basically, he would teach me philosophy, and then he would give me a homework of conditioning to do, and I would train myself in a park. And I did this for 2.5 months. And then through the workings, I auditioned for Cirque du Soleil, I went from being a week away from being homeless to living in the residency in Cirque du Soleil, and then
That
jumping into one of their programs and training their program.
that is so cool. So in circus, I always Circus du Soleil. What was like what was your main, like, because it's different roles, right? Like you do have different like what was your what did you do? Sorry.
My specialty.
Special saying. What was your specialty?
Yeah, my specialty was Russian cradle. So at the time I was learning is what I was supposed to go to the school for, and then what I was learning with Cirque du Soleil. And that's like kettlebell, but with a flyer, a male or female flyer, but mostly female, and you would throw them from one platform to the other, and they would flip, and another person would catch it. We're juggling with girls, kind of,
Yeah.
essentially. And we were elevated like 15 feet in the air, and we were tossing them about 20 feet across from one
That's
person to the other while we were swinging them through our legs. So I was one of the powerhouse porters, yeah, for Russian Cradle. And it only happened because I had auditioned I kind of got in contact with casting, and then someone got injured, and I just happened to be there. And it was another moment where I happened to be there, and I happened to be able to speak Russian. And that, one second, I have to quickly get the door. Sorry.
no worries.
So I happened to be able to speak Russian, and that was the turning point, because everyone on the team was Russian, and the person who got injured was Russian, and that's what gave me the job.
Wow. I mean,
And my Russian was only good because I'd practiced Russian exclusively with my coach for 2.5 months. So I went from not understanding him to kind of being able to understand him, and that was my entryway to Cirque du Soleil.
Wow. I'm looking at like some just images of Russian cradle, and it's like how you think of like a trapeze artist, like throwing, like, how do you train for that by yourself? Like is that with the kettlebell? Like you just kind of
Yeah. It's a lot of kettlebell, a lot of coordination, a lot of visualization of figuring out the timing.
Yeah.
And a lot of it, like, you develop instincts, so you have to be able to feel the timing, and you do that through visualization.
Wow. And then when you do it for the first time, like, I mean, obviously you're doing it like with like some safety, right? But I imagine that's just nerve-wracking, right?
Yeah, they gave me a doll, like it was
okay.
this metal thing that weighed 50 kilos
Gotcha.
that I would swing around, and I trained with that for 2 weeks before. But yeah, all the partners that I worked with would be in lines. They'd be in a harness with lines, and there was a coach who would pull lines. Yeah.
Man, there's so many places I want to go, but I want to get into, so what led back to Hollywood through all this?
So I went through the formation program with Cirque du Soleil. They flew me back to Los Angeles. So when I went to Canada, I had very little money. I didn't even have a plan. I just kind of went there, and I was like, okay, I'll get through the first month of school, and then we'll see where the wind blows. And then they flew me back, and now I had a little bit of savings again. I spent 2.5 months just stranded, just training and surviving in Montreal. So then I was back in Hollywood, and I started, at that time, I was like, okay, now I have some skill sets. Then I started auditioning again, getting more agents and things like that, and continue training. The Cirque du Soleil taught me the work ethic that in the big leagues, beforehand, I was training 3 hours a day. I was training 3 hours a day, 6 days a week, 18 hours a week. That's intense training. So I thought.
Yeah, right.
And then I went to Cirque du Soleil and realized how much everyone trained and how much of their background it was. And when I came back to LA, I knew that 3 hours a day was not enough. And that's when my brother and I started pushing more, and we started training 4 hours a day, 5 hours a day, 6 hours a day, until we got to our full day was training. We'd go to the gym in the morning, we'd bring our breakfast, I'd have my own stretch routine, my own training routine, we'd take breaks, but literally we were in the gym the entire day, and people thought that we worked there because we were there full time.
That's so
Yeah,
cool.
so that kind of pushed me to the next level. And then through connections that I'd made in Montreal, I had the opportunity to audition for Pippin, which was a
Mm.
Broadway musical. So I'd done
Hmm.
some more stunt work. I now worked more stunt fighting, more coordination, more acting classes, more learning the art. And I started transitioning into suit acting.
Mm.
Out of stunts. Stunts was like my gateway, and then I started transitioning to suit acting after meeting Doug Jones, who was Abe Sapien, and he played a
Hmm.
lot of iconic creature roles.
Yeah.
And he was the one who kind of put it in my head that this is a career option.
Yeah.
So for me, I didn't enjoy stunts that much, but I enjoyed movement and storytelling.
Hmm.
And Creature gave me that liberty of I would go through full prosthetics or being some kind of suit or some costume, and then I'd play monsters and aliens and werewolves and zombies and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that became my specialty. So
Hmm.
then I went from training stunt stuff to training specifically movement and coordination. So I did a lot of clown classes, a lot of mime, a lot of physical theater to learn about movement and storytelling through movement, nonverbal storytelling.
Yeah.
Um, and that's kind of, and then I worked on Broadway, and then I toured. I took another break and toured for a while, and then I came back and I had a little bit more gravity behind my presence because I had done that experience and I had that on my resume and had made more connections, and that kind of gave me more opportunities in Los Angeles.
Hmm.
And that kind of my movement training and my work ethic is what kind of later led to Darth Vader.
Wow. Yeah. So doing, I mean, I'm looking at your, filmography, and you were saying you did a lot of creature work, like you were on Jimmy Kimmel Live as a Demogorgon and
Yeah,
Chewbacca, uh, and so that kind of all led to. I mean, you were also in the very first episode of the Mandalorian, correct?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So is
So
that like? Well, go ahead.
so it was all because of movement.
Movement,
So
right?
I was known for being able, one, for being able to go there. So whenever I do a
Hmm.
creature role, I could go as far into creature as I
Yeah.
want. Some people have that barrier. And for
Hmm.
me, I would like to go as far into it as possible.
Hmm.
So I could lose myself in a creature performance.
Yeah.
I become the creature, or whatever I do, I become.
Hmm.
Uh, so that was the first aspect, and then also being very coordinated. When I was younger, I used to be known for flipping, so I was one of the tallest acrobats. And even now, I'm the world's tallest person who could do. This is very obscure, but I'm the world's tallest person who could do a handstand on a rollabola, which is a pipe and a piece of wood, and you're
Uh-huh.
balancing on a balance pipe. But
Yeah.
it's not like an Indo board; it's like a metal cylinder with a wooden plank. And then
Uh-huh.
I could do a straight body handstand on it. And in my handstand, I'm 9 feet tall. So I'm the
Man.
world. I tried to set this record numerous times, but Guinness always flags it because it's too specific.
Right.
But I'm the world's tallest person who could do it.
That's so
So
that's
basically, yeah,
cool.
it was the coordination. It was being
Yeah.
able to flip, being able to react, being able to do a lot of like intricate things.
Mm.
So I never was the person who liked to wreck, but I could flip and I could wreck. And
Hmm.
mostly it was my ability to embody a character,
Mm.
and that's what kind of got me these opportunities. And through creature acting, there's this gray area. Sometimes it's cast through casting, and sometimes it's cast through stunts.
Mm.
And because of my connections within the stunt industry, I would get half my work from stunts, another half I would audition for, and that's kind of where it was. So half of my stunt credits are all creature things as well.
Wow. Yeah, no, I didn't even look at the your stunt credits as well. There's a lot there as well. Um but your ultimate goal is to act, right? When you
Yeah,
set
yeah, yeah,
off for
yeah,
this. So
yeah.
like so you let this uh, talking about being on Obi-Wan as the performance artist for Darth Vader, like what led to this? Like like what audition did you audition for this? Was it offered to you? Like, and who played that performance artist before you?
So basically, the way I got the part was through the Force. That's the way I describe it. It's
Right?
I have this really strong belief. You call it manifestation,
Mm,
call it visualization, call it whatever, but it's that concept that if you build it, they will come.
Yeah.
Like if you set out there and you make a plan, somehow through magic, who knows, the universe aligns itself. And like my whole experience has been that embodiment where I move and just my life goes through these chaotic waves as I'm stranded in Canada, or I'm working circus, or I'm doing stunts, or as things are happening, everything is moving me towards the same path in a very obscure path. And it's a path that I would never describe and I
Mm.
would never pre-plan. But in the end goal, I end up exactly where I set out to be.
Hmm.
And the same thing happened to me in circus. It happened to me in breakdancing. It happened throughout my whole life. And the only thread line that I had was this internal faith that if I keep walking forward into the darkness, I will
Hmm.
find the destination
Wow.
without having a plan.
Yeah.
So a lot of my plans were so naive and so superficial that I was like, okay, move there, meet someone, get job, done. 2 steps. Awesome. I'm going to be successful in 2 steps. And then you get hit with reality, but you keep moving. It's the
Mm.
perseverance. And when you kind of learn to navigate through the swamp or through the shadows or through the unknown, you kind of start finding yourself at these destinations, whether and not by the way that you intended.
Mm.
So with me, I had heard through the grapevine of the role.
Mm-hmm.
Because I had done suit acting, I had a few people reach out, but the role was super, super NDA. So no one
Mm.
knew
Right.
the role that was coming, but people were already whispering about there's this iconic character, it's in space, fights the sword.
Right.
That's as much as I could say, kind of. And I say,
You're
okay, I got you. So I didn't know how to necessarily find the role, but I was like, well, what I could do is I could start practicing sword. That was my way of like putting it to the universe that
mm-hmm.
I want to do this thing.
Yeah.
And also, when I had moved from Spokane, I told people, I boasted with no credibility and no way to back it up, that if there ever was a Darth Vader, I would play Darth Vader,
Wow. You
which
very
is
much
dumb, which is dumb.
you very much manifested it then did
But
that's so
then, like, another Darth Vader took place. Rogue One took place, and there already was a
oh
Darth Vader.
mm-hmm.
And I was like, wow, I guess that window is closed.
Mm.
But, years later, it's like a few years ago. So now I'm training sword. And then I
Yeah.
get a call from a stunt coordinator who had my number referred to them based on my movement ability. And the other thing is you have to be in suit acting, you have to know how to meditate. It's a
Mm-hmm.
huge factor. You have to know how to be okay with not being okay
Right.
because you lose some of your senses. You might lose your hearing, you might lose your sight, you might be completely encased in a suit where you lose your sense of contact with the environment. You might
Mm-hmm.
overheat, you might sweat, you might not be able to use the bathroom or eat for long periods of time. So you
Yeah.
have to get used to just being uncomfortable for 15 hours a day. And you have
Wow.
to be okay with that. Okay. And a lot of
Yeah.
people get claustrophobic and they freak out and they want to be out of it. And you have to learn to just be okay with not being okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's a huge factor. So they were looking for a suit actor who was good with mobility and performance. And
Mm-hmm.
the biggest factor was it wasn't just a person in a suit. They had to be okay with being in a suit for long periods of time and also to be able to do the storytelling.
Yeah.
And that's so I got contacted, but I wasn't told what the role was. And when I got contacted, I knew exactly what the role was. It was the same thing. It was like it's a big franchise. It's this big character, wears a suit of armor, fights with a sword. And I was like, that's Darth Vader. I already know it. I already know that's Darth Vader. And when I
Right.
got that call, I just doubled down. And so they gave me a script and they gave me a like an audition for a mock script
Mm-hmm.
to play a general. And as I was reading the script, I'm like, this is Darth Vader. I know this is Darth Vader. So what I did was I contacted one of my friends who's a VFX artist, and I contacted another good friend of mine who's one of the producers of Legion M. He's
Mm.
David Baxter, and I borrowed his screen accurate Darth Vader suit. And I had my friend do visual effects, and I shot my audition tape in full suit with VFX, with the
Wow.
scene and some additional stuff. And then I didn't hear anything back. And I left my agent's information at the bottom. And then I didn't hear anything back. And I was like, oh no, I've said too much because I wasn't supposed to know what the role was. And no
Mm-hmm.
one told me what the role was. And I just took a shot in the dark, and I wanted
Yeah.
to prove my commitment, but also it could have been a different character. Or I shouldn't have known that it was this character. So
Mm-hmm.
I submitted this, and then 1 week went by, then 2 weeks went by, and 3 weeks went by, and I was like, "Oh man, I kicked the hornet's nest. I think that opportunity is done." And
Yeah.
then but also this was around the holidays. And then the next period, I get contacted through my agent for a non-disclosed project from Disney, completely different, to audition for this role as another general, and completely unrelated. And I was like, I think we're back. I think this is it. So I went through, I think, 4 auditions, and this was during COVID, so this was Zoom auditions,
Right.
with different casting directors. And finally, there was an audition with the director and the stunt coordinator and the producers and the entire team. And at that time, I already knew 100% what this project was.
Yeah.
So for my audition, like it's like this, like a Zoom audition. I have a cup in the frame, and I have this Darth Vader mug. So I put the Darth Vader mug here during the the interview, and they're like, "Do you know what you're auditioning for?" And I was like, "Yeah, I have no idea." And this is after I had already sent the self tape with me in full suit. This is after all these auditions, and they're like, "You're auditioning for Darth Vader," and I'm like, "Oh my god!" But at that point, I had known already, and that still, I still didn't have the part yet. This was already like the fourth audition, and then they had me called me into the studios, where I put on the suit, not the main suit, but a suit that they have, like a loaner suit for PR and stuff, and they had me try to do a certain walk, and this was the most important thing from the get-go. So this was, I guess, the reason why the previous performance artist, the previous suit actor for Darth Vader, wasn't recast. Was there was a certain type of walk that they wanted, and I guess the way he had walked had a form of like swagger or a sway to it, and they wanted precision and complete isolation. And not only that, but they wanted to revolutionize the walk and make a new version of it, update it. So take everything that David Prowse had done and then expand it with everything that has been shown in the animated series and the video games, and fuse it into this new modern Darth Vader. So we had to get like the control and the stillness of Darth Vader, but also the power and aggression of David Prowse. And fuse that, because the younger parts of Darth Vader, it's more raw power. Later on, you have more of this master character being revealed through the years of this master who holds himself in his space. But that came later on, and then we're fusing the two together. And then we're also taking it back to making it young, arrogant Darth Vader. So the walk was this very important part in front of the director. And as we were practicing, she started noticing that there was a sway in my helmet. Or no, it was my box. There was like the light box would have this little bit of a sway. And she was trying to get it to be isolated because it was distracting her. And the walk was fine, but the sway was there, and we're trying to find ways to strap it or do something. But I had a knee injury beforehand, and I had a slight limp, very, very, very subtle. It never once has it ever been picked up anywhere. I've always been aware of it. I've always mitigated by walking and making correct steps and everything. And what she was looking at was a slight compensation in my hip. But the way it manifested was from the top, was the top of my body would wiggle a little bit. But it was coming from my hip, and I knew it was coming from my hip. And in fact, I was retracting my hip to keep it locked in, and I was grinding through my hip as I was walking to hide any limp or any sway, and she was still picking up on it. And in that moment, I understood that if I really wanted this role, I had to completely retrain my body. I had to retrain the scar tissue from my old injury and everything. So after that meeting, I passed the meeting, I got the role, and I immediately requested for a movement coach. And I went into intense training to retrain my body, completely retrain my body, to retrain my hips, the way they moved, everything, so that I could isolate completely and I could have this glide walk as if he's floating.
Totally.
And that was, I spent 1,000 hours practicing just walking for the role.
Well, I mean, it's so important when you think of Darth Vader because of how he moves and like as being imposing. And when I think I've only watched the Obi-Wan once, but I forget which episode it is, but when you're walking through the city looking for Obi-Wan, that's you, right?
Yeah, that's episode 3. I'm the suit actor, so I'm literally all the scenes of Darth Vader are me.
Okay.
Outside of the stunts and the fighting.
Gotcha.
That's done by my stunt double. Yeah.
Yeah, and because like that was you could see like you were trying to like hunt Obi-Wan or like like it. I remember that. I just remember that vividly. Like it very, very much sticks
Yeah.
out in my mind as being very imposing and very like very, very scary. Because I mean, is that the first time you see Darth Vader on screen in the
Yeah.
series? Yeah.
There's a shot of him, I think, being assembled.
Mm.
I think I don't really remember, but that was my first day on set.
Oh wow.
That was my first day filming. Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. So after all this, you ended up you leave Spokane. You're telling people, "I'm going to Hollywood. I'm going to be Darth Vader," and it ends up happening. So what was after it aired and it like premiered, whatever? Like, what was the feeling afterwards?
Well, it was interesting because I went into like whatever I do, I embody what I do.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever I do, I commit 10x.
Yeah.
And in the very beginning, I got really excited when I got the role. You know, it was the role of a lifetime to play Darth
Yeah.
Vader. And then the first couple months of doing my scene work and prepping for it, I got all the movement down.
Mm-hmm.
So I studied David Prowse religiously and got all the movement down. And then as I started filming myself in my rehearsals and everything else, it didn't feel right. None of it felt right.
Yeah.
And I started doubting myself and I started getting in my head and I was like, all of this is terrible because there's so many stories of what has happened to other actors who have
Mm-hmm.
played iconic characters. And if they're off by just a millimeter, they get torn apart by the fandom. You've
Yeah.
ruined my entire childhood. You've done, and the pressure was so much because it wasn't just playing Darth Vader. It was Darth Vader returning to the actual live performance, and it was the most Darth Vader ever shown since Darth Vader.
Wow.
So there's as much Darth Vader in Obi-Wan Kenobi as there is in the first three movies.
Wow. That's
And
nuts to think
before
about.
that, in Rogue One, there was, I think, a minute and 30 seconds of Darth Vader. That was the only
Mm-hmm.
Darth Vader. So up until this point, this is the first time we're bringing Darth Vader back.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of Darth Vader.
Wow.
So that was the pressure behind it, was that if I mess this up, I'm gonna have a lot of people very unhappy with me. And the pressure was so high, and I started filming myself, and I hated everything that I saw. For me, it just looked like I was cosplaying,
Mm-hmm.
and it didn't feel
Mm.
real. And I had this whole panic moment, and I contacted one of my good friends, David Baxter, who in my mind is the Darth Vader specialist. And I was trying to get some direction for the role because I had already done everything I could think of, and I still felt like I hadn't found the character.
Mm-hmm.
But I couldn't tell him what the project was, so I said that I was working on a fan film,
Huh.
and I was playing Darth Vader, and I'm having this whole freak out moment. And he's in the industry, so he knows what the role is. He knows
Mm-hmm.
but he also can't say. So I'm kind of going through this experience, and he said, Demetrius, I'm not going to give you any advice.
Mm.
He's like, this is your character, this is your role. Anything that I say will negatively influence it, and it will shape your performance.
Mm-hmm.
Like, but what I will say is what this meant to me, what Star Wars meant to me, what Darth Vader meant to me. And he kind of went through his background of like watching Star Wars as a kid, going multiple times to the movie theater, the fear of the VFX being so cutting edge that he thought that they would cut through the screen,
Mm.
and really what a cultural phenomenon Darth Vader was. And
Mm-hmm.
after this talk, I was supposed to feel better, but I didn't feel better at all. I was like freaking out even more. But he gave me his blessing, and that was the talk that I needed. And what I realized was that I was obsessing about the wrong thing.
Mm.
I was obsessing about trying to do the movement of Darth Vader. And what I had to do to truly understand the character is I needed to understand Anakin Skywalker.
Mm.
So I took a step back and I just studied Anakin for a month.
Mm.
For a whole month, I just studied Anakin from the beginning to the end. And when I studied Anakin, that's when I understood Darth Vader,
Mm.
because I realized that I was Anakin.
Mm-hmm.
I had the same upbringing. I mean, not the same upbringing, but similar stories of,
Yeah.
he grew up in poverty. I grew up in poverty. I was an immigrant. He was a slave. And having these parallels of being the underdog, having pressure put on you, being one of those people who will sacrifice everything for something they believe in
Mm-hmm.
based on intuition, on a feeling,
Yeah.
right? And you can't explain the feeling to anyone else, and that feeling is just the force, right? So having these kind of experiences and having these injuries in my life and having to recover from them and everything, in the end, I realized that I was Anakin and I was
Mm.
Darth Vader. And once I had this epiphany, then it all made sense and the character made sense. But
Right.
as I was prepping for the role, I was in a dark place a lot of the time. I was doing a lot of like Sith meditation. I was learning how to meditate into rage and then calming myself down, because the whole point was that it had to be real.
Mm-hmm.
This wasn't cosplay. This was my chance to showcase, uh, bringing an iconic character to life.
Yeah.
So, and because the suit eats away a lot of the corrections, I was working a lot with my movement coach on details, on subtlety, on building rage through hyperventilation. So like we would build the rage through breath, and then
Mm.
you wouldn't see it, you would feel it. When you
Right.
watch it, and later on when I rewatched my own work, I couldn't even see what I was doing, which was the most hilarious part. We're doing all these like subtle things, but what you felt a presence, you felt an
Mm.
energy, and it didn't feel flat. And that was the biggest fear that I had, was that it's a character that's been portrayed so many times through cosplay, through fan films, through everything, that it's been done so many different times, and the biggest fear was that it would feel flat.
Mm.
It would feel like a fan film, would feel like cosplay, and it didn't
Yeah.
feel like that. It was very real. But I was also in a very, very dark place psychologically while we were filming. And earlier on, beforehand, I wanted to do some of the sword fighting, because I had done stunts before, and I'm very coordinated and ambidextrous and
Mm-hmm.
everything. And they told me I couldn't do the sword fighting.
Mm.
And for me, at the same time, I perceived that, because it was in the mind of Anakin, was the same thing of them telling Anakin he cannot be a master.
Oh.
So because they didn't want to train me in sword, I trained myself, and I started training 3 hours a day in sword to prove that I could do sword.
Mm-hmm.
And then which later went to 4 hours a day, which later went to 5 hours a day. And then
Mm-hmm.
even when we finished filming, I still had this deep resentment and this deep anger from all this like stuff, because I had opened up Pandora's box
Mm-hmm.
to being Darth Vader, and I couldn't close it afterwards. I
Yeah.
had opened up the darkness within myself, and I couldn't close it. And the only way I could keep going was to do something, and that something was training sword. So
Mm-hmm.
I even after we filmed, I continued training sword 5 hours a day for a year and a half,
Wow.
until now I'm almost done with my little sword project, but now I'm legitimately a sword master. I'm like
That's
literally one of the best in the world.
that's so cool. And you're bringing that to the Lac City Comic Con, correct?
Yeah, I'm gonna do a sword performance on stage.
Yeah. I was gonna like ask like in was it could you not do the sword performance because of your height compared to
No.
it wasn't that?
I don't know why.
Oh, okay.
I honestly don't know. None of it made sense, because I was already very coordinated, and not only that, but the stunt coordinator had promised me that I'd be put into training,
Yeah.
and at the time I was so manic with my role that I was training 10 hours a day for like five
Mm-hmm.
months. And even before they put me in sword training, I was training myself 3 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
That was part of my character development, was like, if I'm truly to play, because the whole thing with Darth Vader is that he's trying to become a master. He's
Mm-hmm.
trying to not become a master. He's trying to prove that he's the ultimate master. And out of all these other so-called masters who couldn't appoint him to master, he's better
Yeah.
by himself without anyone's help. That's
Huh.
Darth Vader.
I mean
That's
it's
Anakin. That's
uh,
Darth Vader. It's the
life
stubbornness.
yeah.
Yeah.
Life
So for
imitates
me,
art. Yeah.
yeah. So for me, it was uh, I kept on asking the stunt coordinator. I kept on asking my movement coaches, and he's like, "Yeah, in a week, in a week, in a week." And then
Mm-hmm.
finally, it was just, "No, we're not going to train you." And it didn't make sense to me, because I was good. I was already good.
Mm-hmm.
But later on, I realized it's because they wanted to separate the roles. That way, I could focus only on the acting, and my
Mm-hmm.
stunt double could focus only on the action. And it's better to have two people specialize in separate roles than it is to fulfill a single person's ego.
Yeah.
That was the conclusion. But at the
Totally.
time, it did not make sense. And for me, I just wanted to do a little bit, not all of it, just a tiny little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And after about maybe 5 months into training, and we're about halfway through filming, the director, Deborah Chow, came up to me and she's like, "I kind of wish you had gone through sword training, because some of the stuff isn't matching." So because I'm the hero, I'm the suit actor, I do the hero shots. I lead into the action, I come out of the
Mm.
action, do the
Yeah.
transitions in between, and then it cuts to my stunt double who does all the fighting, and then it cuts back to me.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, "I kind of wish that you had done some of the sword training, because some of the stuff isn't overlapping. You're 6'7", he's like 6'2" or 6'3" in
Mm-hmm.
lifts. The proportions are different, the bodies look different. So, excuse me. So basically, I was like, oh, that's perfect. I've been training sword 3 hours a day now for 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, oh, okay. Yeah, then I'll put you in. And then from then on, I started overlapping more and more and more sword stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
for me, it was the part that hurt the most was because I had done stunts before, and the stunt coordinator knew the whole time, and I was sending him videos of my training, and
Mm-hmm.
that never was relayed from the stunt coordinator to the director. She had no idea,
Huh. Oh man,
and
that's
that was bizarre. That was very bizarre, and I had a lot of like resentment and vendetta, and that was part of, and I was already in a dark place to begin with, and I was
mm-hmm.
already in the mindset of Anakin and Darth Vader, and and I was stuck in that mindset for a year and a half after we had done filming.
Right.
I was just in this very dark place, and I stayed there for a long time until I could pull myself out of it.
That
And the darkness scared me. It scared me because it was something that I didn't believe was inside of me, and then I saw
mm-hmm.
it, and then
Wow.
it was me. Yeah.
That's intense. That's really
Yeah, yeah, no,
intense.
no, it was intense. When we finished filming, I mean, to be completely real, I was like borderline suicidal when we finished filming. I was in
Wow.
such a dark place, and when we finished filming, I thought that I would be better because I was
Mm.
doing all of this like chaotic stuff, and I was pushing so hard for this moment. And we
Mm-hmm.
finished filming, and I thought that this pressure would be relieved and I'd be done. And what happened was I got thrown into the deepest depression I've ever felt, and nothing made me happy, and everything was gray,
Mm.
and food tasted bland, and I had no motivation to do anything, and nothing had meaning, and I didn't want to do anything. And
Huh.
that was the conclusion after I finished filming, which I thought would be the opposite.
Mm.
So I wasn't excited at all. I was in this, and I was in this dark place because I had lived. It was my first time of staying in the headspace of a character for
Yeah.
so long. I was in
Huh.
that headspace for 9 months, and my entire day was in that headspace. And part of my routine was I teach meditation, and I inverted everything and did everything that you're not supposed to do. So I'd meditate into rage and find the worst things that I hated about things, and I would obsess about that and hyperventilate and go into rage. And then that was the beginning of my training. And then I would rage train for another 6 hours, and I would calm myself down. And I did that for 6 months before we even started filming. So by the time we got to filming, I could go in and out of rage really quickly to peak rage. And that was the idea, was to create these tools so I could go maximum Darth Vader and then pull back, and then go maximum Darth Vader and pull back. Um, but it was so ingrained in me, this routine that I had done. And I thought when I finished filming that I could just kind of take it off and I'd be
Mm-hmm.
done with it. And what happened was I stayed in that place, in that rage place, in that self-loathing place, in that place needing to prove something.
Mm.
And I stayed there for a long time. And actually, so I was in Spokane right afterwards. I
Mm.
reached out to Nadine at Spokane Gymnastics, and I hadn't coached in a long time. And I said, hey, can I come back and like work with preschool or like little kids? And I was trying to just do everything to make myself feel good again.
Right.
So I worked, she had me working with preschool at Spokane Gymnastics, and no one had known that I had just finished playing Darth Vader or anything. I just came in there as a guest coach, working with preschool, and I worked with animals afterwards. And I did a lot of charity work in Mexico where I was teaching workshops for free
Mm.
to underprivileged circus artists in handstands and other things in meditation. And I was just giving and giving and giving, and nothing was helping. And all the tools that I had didn't work anymore. And it was a very, very, very dark period.
How did you get out
And
of it? Did you do counseling? Did you yeah.
it was interesting because at the time I couldn't speak about the role because it
Mm.
wasn't just, there was the dark experience that I put myself through for my character
Right.
development. And there was
Uh-huh.
also some shenanigans that happened behind the scenes with the industry and everything else.
Yeah.
And those two combined, I couldn't really speak about it with anybody
Mm.
because I was under very extreme NDAs.
Right, of course.
So I didn't know how to approach it, and what ended up fixing it was I broke my hand. It seems weird, but I was in an audition, and I was doing this like superhero kind of audition, and I was playing this like Hulk-like character auditioning for, and we're jumping in from car to car in wires, and I'm supposed to jump down and punch into
Yeah.
a car. And I'm on this panel on this big whale mat, what they call a resi mat, and it had a piece of plywood underneath, and it had a panel mat on top. And I didn't know that it had plywood underneath, and had so much adrenaline that I punched as hard as I could, and I broke my hand in the audition.
Uh,
Um, it was just because of the drama. It was a silly mistake because you're always supposed to pull your punches. You're supposed to make
mm,
it look like it hurts, but not actually hurt. So
right.
I broke my hand, and I have this way I teach people how to tap into the placebo effect.
Mm.
Through visualization and through meditation, you could stimulate your healing
Mm-hmm.
significantly through the power of belief, through positive psychology, through, call it prayer, manifestation, whatever. But basically, through visualization and believing that you're going to get better, and visualizing that you have stem cells in your body and you're releasing them to a region, you could speed up the healing. So I broke my hand, and I was flying into Mexico the next day to teach handstand workshops. And I can't do handstand, and my Spanish is terrible. It's always terrible. So usually I rely on showing people what I could do, but now I can't even show people, and I can't explain it. So I didn't end up teaching the classes, but I was in Mexico for a month. I was supposed to be teaching a bunch of series of workshops.
Yeah.
And I spent that whole month just meditating and focusing on healing my hand. And then, what happened was it was broken. I needed surgery immediately, but I didn't have the time, so I wouldn't be able to go to Mexico if I got surgery. So I went to Mexico, and they said, well, when you come back, we're going to have to re-break it and then get surgery and do it. And I said, we'll see. And then I went to Mexico and I rehabbed it myself.
Wow.
And then when I went into the checkup, it was already healed and it was fine. And I didn't need surgery.
The force.
The force, yeah. But I healed it in 4 weeks.
That's crazy. That's so cool.
Yeah.
The power of meditation, right?
The power of it's the power of, it's the placebo effect.
Yeah.
It's the power of unwavering belief and using your mind, connecting your mind with your body. So giving your body resources to heal, giving it more oxygen, giving it more nutrients, and then also telling it, because you have stem cells within your body, in your fat cells, in your bone marrow, and they're waiting to be released whenever there's this big injury that's supposed to happen or something. Your body has this reservoir as like a backup. And you could tell your body to release them, but your body doesn't understand English or Russian or whatever language you speak.
Right.
So basically you do it through visualization and through emotions and feelings. So you visualize, and people visualize light, and it doesn't even matter what you visualize.
Yeah.
You could visualize that an angel is coming and bathing you in light. You could visualize that your chakras are being aligned through light or through a color. Or for me, I find it easier to fuse medicine and science. So I actually visualize the parts of my body and the anatomy actually going through. And what happens is that you stimulate your healing through the power of belief.
Wow. That's I've never even thought of that. Because I know I can manifest myself getting sick when I'm like doing something. I always if I have like a big trip coming up, I'm like, I'm going to get sick, and I get sick. But I've never visualized myself feeling healing myself, or I've never thought about that. That is so cool.
Yeah. I mean, that was science.
Yeah.
Up until a few hundred years ago, that was the medicine.
Huh.
But it was through a priestess or a priest or a church or some religious entity, or through a ritual or through a sacrifice, through some kind of thing that you did. It would cultivate belief within you.
Yeah.
So the whole point is you just have to believe, but it doesn't matter how you believe.
Yeah.
Whether you think it's magic or alchemy or Wicca or Christianity or Hinduism or shamanism or whatever path that you go through, you just have to believe that this priest said I'm going to get better, or I prayed to God and I'm going to get better, or I ate these vegetables or these supplements and I got better, or I took this sugar pill that the doctor told me that's a placebo and I'll get better. As long as I believe that I'll get better and I took the action to get better, I'll get better.
That's so cool. I just heard a story. Someone told me the other day that their mom had cancer, had stage 2 cancer, and they didn't do chemo. And I was like, and she's alive still? And they're she did sound therapy. And I was like, so that cured your mom's cancer? But now that you're telling me this, and I'm just like, there's so many different ways you could, if you, through positive thought. Yeah. I've never thought about that. That's so cool.
And it doesn't matter what you believe in. That's the crazy thing. Is it doesn't matter what your placebo is. If I convince you that by eating Skittles, you will lose weight and get better, and you truly believe it, you will subconsciously start making choices that will make you get better and lose weight without even realizing it. You'll be like, okay, maybe I'll walk to the mailbox. I had my Skittles today, or whatever. And you'll do that, and then you'll start making these choices without even realizing it. And subconsciously, you're driving yourself towards this destination of getting better. But also, there's a nocebo. So if you believe you're going to get sick, or
Yeah.
if you believe you're going to fail, or believe you're going to flunk the test, or believe this, and you believe it with such a passion, you will create a self-fulfilling prophecy by making choices subconsciously to make you lose,
Mm.
to make you win or lose, depending on what you want to experience.
Yeah. That's so cool. I man, I feel like we could go on for hours, but I know I want to make sure we keep this short. And I also like, you're going to be at Lilac City Comic Con, you're going to be on a panel, and I want to make sure we don't talk about everything, because you're going to be, I don't want to, I want, this is going to be
There's so much to talk about. I've lived so
exactly.
much life.
It sounds like it. So speaking of Lilac City Comic Con, so I want to ask, like, have you done many conventions before, or what has been your convention experience?
So the convention experience for me has been the best part of this whole. It has been my healing journey through this whole thing.
Yeah.
After I finished, I did not. There's a period where I didn't think I wanted to act anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I was disillusioned by the industry, but also I went into such a dark place that it took so long to come out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I would have given anything to be okay.
Yeah.
And it took months. It took like the first half a year before I started feeling kind of normal, and then even more. And going to such a severe depression to pull out of it was so difficult that I empathize with other people who have gone through depression or have gone through these circumstances where they think it's impossible to pull out. Because
Mm-hmm.
I also, even though I was trained, even though I'm a meditation teacher, even though I have the tools to come out of it, I still thought it was impossible to come out of it.
Yeah.
That's it, because that's how far I went. That's how far I went into the role, and how hard it was to climb out. So the conventions, meeting the fans, has been the most healing part, when people were telling me that it was worth it.
Yeah.
That everything I did, because for me, it was just suffering. The whole thing was suffering. I trained 10 hours a day for almost 6 months, and 10 hours a day is a lot to wake up, to not have someone tell you what to wake up at 7 a.m. to train sword. I'd train sword 3 hours a day. I would walk 3 hours a day. I would meditate into rage. I would work on retraining my hip. I would work on my scene development, my character development. And I did this every single day because Darth Vader had to be perfect.
Mm.
And for me, the idea was that towards the end of it, I was like, you know what? No matter what happens, if it comes out and the fans hate it and they tear me apart, I could look them in the eyes and say that was my absolute best.
Mm.
I literally could not do a single thing more because I did everything I possibly could. And that was my approach towards the role. And what happened was, when I started meeting fans at conventions and having people who were diehard Star Wars fans, Darth Vader fans, telling me that it felt like Darth Vader, and it brought him back to that moment, that was the reward.
Yeah.
So that was the feeling. And this is, I don't know, maybe my seventh or eighth con. And I really liked the experience of meeting fans, but also I enjoy teaching and sharing stories. I enjoy meeting real people.
Mm-hmm.
That was the beauty of the circus, was in the circus, I could be a star on stage.
Mm-hmm.
And then the very next day, I could be at a Food for Less or at a Walgreens or whatever, and be a normal person.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then you get to be around people, and you meet people at the ground level from every city, every state, and you realize how similar the human experience is.
Mm-hmm.
And how similar. So Spokane has there's this Spokane mentality, I want to call it. Spokane mentality. It's not Spokane. It's because the loud, naysaying, complaining voices are all usually the loudest.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And Spokane has this stigma of Spokane. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And what it is this mentality. It's a small-minded thinking that everything is terrible.
Mm-hmm.
And only when you go to places like, I travel to a lot of like third world countries and stuff like that. And once you see true hardship and then come back, you appreciate everything.
Mm.
But it's only when you lose everything that you could appreciate it. You lose everything that you've had. So Spokane has so many resources, and what it lacks is the self-confidence and the belief to just do something. Because anything that you say you will do, probably even when you started your podcast, you probably had 5 people tell you it's going to fail.
Right.
And that's the thing, is that every time someone says they're going to do something, people around them will tell them why it won't work.
Right. Definitely.
And that's that's the problem. That's the problem. Is but also you don't want the opposite. You don't want yes men who'll be like, yeah, it's going to be awesome and everything else. What you need people rooting in your corner.
Mm.
Who'll be like, hey, it's it might not work. It's very difficult, but I believe in you and you should try it even though it's hard. And if you had more of that, then Spokane would be the greatest place to live because it has everything.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only thing that I found that it's missing is this appreciation for what you have, and that only comes from losing everything.
Mm-hmm.
So from being in places that are much bigger hardships, higher rent, less job opportunities. I spent 2 months in Thailand. I just was in Colombia a few months ago, and you see true poverty, true poverty. People working for scraps. You see people and you see compassion. You see people, the most generous people are the most poor, and they have the least amount of stuff. And when you get humbled to that experience, you start appreciating the better things in life. But only once you see it. And that's a harder thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
and
so
when
true.
you grow up with the river and the lakes and the park, I mean, there's like 3 awesome skate parks in Spokane. There's a hip hop community that's thriving, even though it's small, with Hector running it and things like that.
Yeah.
There's so many community events. There's so many lakes in one area. You have like 7 lakes that you can go to.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah, there's the river, and you have the little Spokane River. There's so many hiking places. There's so many outdoor things to do. And with having everything, they still look at it and be like, "Wow, Spokane's a terrible place." And you're like, "Well, you haven't been to terrible places. If you have, you would say that Spokane is the greatest place."
It comes from privilege. I think it's just you get raised in a place where you become complacent, and it's very much privilege. Like you don't see, because you don't see, I mean, you could find it in Spokane, but you don't see poverty that much. You don't see culture that much here. Like that is one of the biggest, problems with Spokane, in my opinion, is that there's just not much culture here, and and if you want to experience it, you have to go find it. And people in Spokane just don't explore that. They don't explore other people's culture here. And, it's something that I try to do as much as I can. And so I can understand that, because I understand that I come from a place of privilege. I understand that my children are going to come from a place of privilege, and making them see things that, that gives them a understanding that, like, oh yeah, I have it good. I need to appreciate this is how we need to teach, our children and, our friends and family. Is just like, the more I can try to tell people, like, we're so privileged and we have the ability to enjoy life in such a blissful state, like it's so hard to convey, And
Because if you tell someone they have privilege, they will rebuttal it. Right?
Totally.
Like, you can't just be like, because everyone has legitimate problems.
Right.
They have health issues, problems with work, friends, whatever. And if you go to their face and be like, "You're privileged, deal with it, suck it up," they will argue with you, and it won't get the point across.
Definitely.
Because we all see our own reality, and our own reality, we're the main character in our own story. So, we're the good guys. Everyone else is the bad guys. The whole universe is conspiring. There's traffic, there's all this other stuff, but we're the good guys. And that's everyone's individual perspective. What teaches appreciation is to take moments and to glorify the good things. Not about the things that you own, not that I have this jet ski or I have this car or whatever, but like taking a moment and be like, "Hey, look, we're outside of nature." That doesn't mean much, but at least take a moment, because when you live in a city and there's no nature, you'll feel it. You'll feel it suck your essence out of you, right? And you just take little moments to be aware of when things are good. The way our memory works is bizarre. So I could have 100 good things happen to me in 100 days, and I will get used to it, and it'll become baseline, it'll become normalized. And then I have one bad thing happen to me 5 years ago. I was on this flight, and this stewardess was rude to me, and I'll tell this story for 10 years. The same story of a 5-minute inconvenience that happened 10 years ago. Yeah. Right? And then all of your good stories you will forget. But you'll remember the one story that inconvenienced you, and you'll repeat that and relive that over and over again. And that's the way our mind works, that we will always remember, because our mind is structured in such a way that we're trying to learn and improve. Right? So we have to be aware of our shortcomings or situations so we could grow and come out of them. But also it means that we forget everything good, and we'll hyper focus on everything bad.
Yeah.
And that creates this negative spiral. So the way to fix this is that you just take moments to pause, and it's hard. I had to learn. I had to do this. I had to keep a journal. That was part of my
Mm.
process of coming out of it. Was taking a moment to find out things that you're thankful for, but not like in the beginning. It was superficial because I was in such a dark place that I was like, I am thankful for coffee, just
Right.
random stuff. But later on, just thankful for the lifestyle, thankful for being able to have a car and not having to commute in public transportation. And
Yeah.
if you're commuting through public transportation, thankful that you have public transportation to commute
Yeah.
to, you know, or thankful that you could walk. That's a huge thing. You know, I like to walk and I walk for miles, but I was injured for a long time where I couldn't walk.
Mm.
You know, I've dislocated my left knee 3 times.
Oh,
So I've been each time I was out for a year. So I know what it feels like to not be able to walk.
yeah.
And not being able to walk and being able to walk, just being able to walk was a game changer. You know, so these are these small things, but you only appreciate them when they're taken away. Or if you teach yourself to take a moment to pause for a second and just reflect on things that you like, things that are good. Because if you look for wrong, there's a million things that you'll find that's wrong with everything, with the world, with politics, with religion, with society, with everything. Anything that you look into, you will find something that is wrong.
Yeah.
But it's so hard to pause and be like, okay, this part is good right now. This is a good moment. This is a good moment.
That's so true. The gratitude you do have to. I used to keep I did this for like a month, so it's not like it wasn't a thing I really did a lot, but like I did a gratitude journal, and it is like you're right, because you can get so angry about not having a car. Like, oh, I should have a car, but like really we should be grateful for being able to have public transportation and be able to get where we're going. And because we, oh yeah, you're right, we think about things in such a negative light, and it's easy, and like it's easy to go to those places of negativity and for some reason rather than the positive. And but being living in gratitude is definitely something that is a learned technique. It sounds like
It's a skill set. Yeah, it's a
yeah, it
skill
sounds
set.
like you're getting your 10,000 hours of getting
Well,
the gratitude.
yeah, it takes practice. That's the
Yeah.
thing, is it's not going to happen innately.
Mm.
It's not like you're going to wake up being grateful for things. You have to have the perspective of knowing when things are better and things are worse. For me, the thing is that I've lived life. I've lived life. I've had very really high highs and very low lows.
Mm.
Uh, 2 times I was almost homeless,
Mm.
and I've been in luxury hotels all over the world. You know, I have the two spectrum.
Yeah.
And what I found is that my true happiness, my happiest moments were when I was struggling the most.
Right.
And what the reason was because I
Mm.
would wake up with purpose. I'd wake up in the morning and I knew exactly what I needed to do. And I had self-fulfillment and validation in doing the thing that I needed to do. My most successful times in my life have been my most aimless,
Mm.
where I now have success. I'm comfortable. I don't know what I want to do. I could do anything, but I don't want to do anything. And when I don't have that purpose within me, that's when I start looking at everything and realizing that I don't like this, I don't like
Mm.
that, this food is oversalted, this. And then I start nitpicking at things when I'm comfortable. And when I'm uncomfortable, I'm working my hardest to become comfortable. Do you know who Sadhguru is?
No, I don't.
Okay, he's this mystic. He does a lot of like teachings and stuff like that on philosophy. And he has this saying that he says. He says, when you're hungry, you have one problem. When
Mm.
you're full, you have 100 problems. Like whenever you have that big problem, the main thing, it's the only thing you focus on, right? You're like, if
Yeah.
I could only get a car, then life will be good, you know, because then I won't have to commute. I won't have to borrow this car. I won't have to take public transportation. Everything will be good. And then when you get that car, then you have a million problems. Okay, now I have the oil change. There's the registration. There's
Mm.
the gas. Oh, I got a scratch on my car. I'm stuck in traffic. There's this. And then you have a million problems. You know, oh, I need to have a better car. I should get a boat. You know, my car should have a tow hitch. I have nowhere to park my car. I have a million problems. But before that, you have this one problem. So life is always simpler when you're hungry,
Huh. That's.
because that's your only problem is to eat. Once you're full, you'll find a million problems.
Do you think going back to playing Darth Vader? Do you think that after you're done playing Darth Vader, that's like you had accomplished what you set out to do, and that's why you went to such a dark place?
I think there was a lot of reasons. Part of it was just I was psychologically doing things that were unhealthy for the role.
Right.
So I was intentionally going into darkest parts of myself, and I was diving into my own psyche in a negative way to really unlock what means to be Darth Vader.
Mm-hmm.
And I found it. I found exactly what I was looking for. Another part of it was there was certain things that happened behind the scenes also, with the industry. And I left being super disillusioned of understanding that even when you do everything right and even when you do your best and show up, there's always this kind of like undercurrent of manipulation or like a darker aspect to the industry that happens behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this form of gatekeeping that prevents people from being successful.
Mm-hmm.
That was the revelation of seeing that firsthand and experience it firsthand after sacrificing so much. And it was just the dark psychological journey that I was experiencing afterwards and having things play out behind the scenes. When I had finished the role and 6 months later I'm still in this deep dark place, I would have traded anything to not do the role. I thought it was a monkey's paw. I thought it was a wish that I had made that was just a curse. And everything that came out of it was a reminder of the worst pain. It was the worst year of my life. The whole filming, the whole process, prepping for the character was literally the worst year of my life. And I've lived many tough years, but that was the worst year psychologically, just the worst, giving absolutely everything to something that you believe in, and then finishing it being completely disillusioned and feeling used and that kind of aspect. And that was my feeling when I finished. And I'll kind of give you a little rundown. There was like problems with my contract where I wasn't paid my contract because it's Disney. So I wasn't paid for my contract, and it was a very simple contract, and it was very easy to do, and it was very black and white. And they found a way to not do it because it's Disney. And then also in my contract, I was supposed to be credited as the suit actor because I was the suit actor. And after we had finished the shooting, I started asking the PR. I was like, "Hey, you've already announced this character playing this character, this playing character. Why haven't I been announced as a suit actor? It's a huge deal. I'm all of Darth Vader. I've been training for 5 months for this, this." And then I realized that they were going to credit the celebrity credit over the actual thing because that's the narrative that people wanted. So it finished with me doing the role, no one knowing that I did the role, not being credited and not being paid for my contract. And then also being in a psychologically dark place.
Right.
And it all happened at the same time. And when it finished, I was so disillusioned with Hollywood, with the whole experience, with knowing how much I showed up, because literally 10 hours a day for 6 months of training, 10 hours a day, and when I finished, I had this feeling of like deep betrayal because it was really deep because it was intentional. It was never, I was credited as a performance artist.
Right.
But up to this moment, you didn't know what the performance artist was.
Right.
Right. You didn't know that every scene of Darth Vader is me outside of the stunts and the fighting.
That's true. You are credited for 2 episodes. Is that so? That's not true. That's not true.
I can't even. No, I'm in 4 episodes. I can't even update it. Or no, I'm in 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, I'm in 4 episodes.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm in all of Darth Vader. But this is the darker sides of the reality of what it means to be an entertainer in a cog in a machine.
Yeah.
That is selling an idea. Yeah, so it was a very and for me the con experience was the saving grace out of everything. Was to meet people and for people, and the hardest part was in the beginning when I was like, "Hey, I'm the suit actor." I got to meet the toxic side of the fandom. Right? People say, "No, you're a liar. You're pretending that you were there. You're trying to steal credit from this person and this." And I was like, after everything I've done, after this worst year of my life, after this entire journey, then to be called a liar was like the worst thing. And then I had to be like, okay, I have to distance myself from the internet. I have to just cut myself off. I have to focus on only the things that I truly care about and understand how superficial this concept is.
Yeah.
This concept of fame or whatever it is. And through that period, I had a lot of introspection and personal growth and everything. And then afterwards, I still did a couple acting projects since then, but I haven't been as excited, to be completely honest. I've done it, I'm like, okay, yeah, cool. This was cool. This was a good experience. Everyone was cool. It was a fun time. but it wasn't that excitement that I used to have before, that I'm playing a new character. I get to tell a story. This aspect, because I guess I lost my innocence in a way after that whole experience. Yeah.
Yeah. I should ask, like, I mean, since then, like, what is, like, well, I guess it's been 2 years since then, since it's premiered at least. Like, what's next for Dmitrious?
Okay, so here's the new thing. So I've been working. So when I coach gymnastics, and I used to coach circus, I used to coach youth circus, and then I coached elite athletes. My specialty has been gamified everything, finding ways to make training fun, because when I trained 10 hours a day, you had to find micro games and ways to make it interesting.
Yeah.
So I made a fitness game called Fit Chain. I'm in the process of producing it. Hopefully, I'll have it printed by Spokane, but it's right on the line, so it may or may not arrive in time. But this is what I've been working on for the last year.
Yeah.
It's a gamified fitness game. It's made for any sports team, and it's basically your basics, the most essential conditioning to be good at any sport. Gymnastics, dance, acrobatics, yoga, football, basketball, whatever sport you do, you will become automatically better. And what it is, it's a two-person dueling game. You're trying to make the other person work out. You're trying to avoid working out. You play a game. It plays about 25 minutes. And in that process of 25 minutes, you get a pretty intense workout of your core conditioning. And then this game has 3 levels. It has beginner, it has regular, and then it has advanced. And the game scales. Each level you go up doubles in intensity. So you start off at any level, beginner, 6 years old, in whatever sport. And as you play the game and get stronger, you could play the game more intensely.
Yeah.
And basically, this goes all the way to advanced. And then I have an elite version that's literally Cirque du Soleil, elite gymnastics, elite dances, the highest of the pinnacle of training.
That's so cool.
And what it's done, it's a fun training tool that you could use to enhance your training. Basically, instead of having to condition, you just have to play a game.
Yeah.
You play once a day, and you get stronger. As you get stronger, you can go further.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be partnering with Spokane Gymnastics, and I'm going to be hopefully selling some at their facility. But we'll see if the universe provides it. I ordered it a week ago, but it takes over a month to ship, so it may or may not arrive. So we'll see. But that's been the biggest one, was I've been making passion projects. I wrote 2 books. Neither of them are good, but I wrote 2 books. One of them I'm going to rewrite myself. Another one I'm looking for a writer to co-author to rewrite with me. I'm working on another book right now. I created 4 games. These are 2 of them. But I have a prototype of a new game that I'm working on that I'm looking for investors and to take it larger. And I made a puzzle game. So that's kind of been my new thing, was been just working on passion projects, just things that I find exciting. I still teach. I've been trying to teach workshops. I created 3 master classes in sword, or 1 in meditation and 2 in sword. One is understanding the philosophy of the force through sword spinning. And another one is elite dual wielding, which is I'm going to be teaching these at a different con in Texas at the end of June. And then I'm teaching master classes in Spokane. And basically, when I was training circus, I created a system of training, which I call transition theory. So it's years ago. I've always been like a nerdy guy who studies technique and theory and everything. And it was at the time when I just started hearing about machine learning and neural networks and deep learning. And I created a system of accelerated learning that's modeled after deep learning. So machine learning is modeled after human learning. And I was like, well, they simplified the process. So if I back analyze machine learning, I could create better human learning. So I created a system for accelerated learning to get from 0 to mastery by following just a series of simple rules. And I developed it in handstands, I developed it in sword and everything else. And through that process, it has allowed me to become really good at juggling, really good at handstands, really good at essentially anything that I train by following this system. And now I've created versions of it. So I have a whole handstand system where anybody at any level could start. And it's like paint by numbers. If you know the core steps and the core rules, you could train by yourself with having only light guidance of a coach, but using an intuitive, self-reflective kind of way to train. And that's mostly about it, is for people, because I grew up, when I was doing all my training, I didn't have money, I didn't have resources. I just had to figure it out.
Right.
And what this allows people to do is if they don't have the privilege of having classes around or having resources, they could, if they have the drive, they could get to the destination
Hmm.
by following a very simplified system.
That,
And sorry, go on.
oh, no, I was going to say, I was want I'll let you finish.
Yeah, so with basically the whole time I've been training sword, because the whole theme has been of Darth Vader becoming a master.
Mm.
So I legitimately have been training to become a sword master. And when I mean sword master, I mean literally I'm trying to become the best in the world in sword.
Mm.
Not the best in Spokane, not the best in Los Angeles, not the best in the industry, not the best out of every sword master ever existed. The best of the best.
Yeah.
So I've studied a lot of different disciplines. I went to Thailand and I trained under a sword master in Thailand. And I trained Krabi Krabana, and I'm creating my own sword style. So it's not someone else's style. It's from the ground up, a whole foundation, a whole framework of a new fantasy style that doesn't exist, called Sword and Shield style. So that's been like my over-encompassing passion project. I'm about maybe 6 months away from finishing. And when I finish it, it's what I call the ultimate style. It's with two swords. It involves every single style that exists. It has single sword kenjutsu. It has with double grip. It has two sword krabi kraban or stick fighting.
Yeah.
It has staff fighting. It has unarmed combat. It has every version of fighting all into one system. And then it's also a fantasy concept. So it requires you to be 100% ambidextrous. And it's like this high fantasy sword concept that I hope to later trademark.
That's
for
so...
like motion capture for like video games or like for elves or something like that. Something with fantasy.
Yeah. Gee, wow, it just seems like you. I mean, when you were talking about when you're saying this, you have the system that you're creating. The question I was going to ask is like, like, is it something that can be taught like through any type of like mastering?
Yeah.
Like, if I want,
Yeah. It's anything physical. So what I found is that it doesn't necessarily work with like learning languages or learning math or learning science. It has to do with physical practice. And basically, it's an understanding of body mechanics, repetition, the framework of the mind, the psychology of learning, how the brain stores information, and also using meditation to enter the flow state. So all of the training is done in the flow state, and it's done in a very simplified way of you learn A, and then you learn B, and you practice A and B, and then you learn the transition between A and B, right? And then you practice that, and then you learn C, and then you learn the transition from A to C, and you learn the transition from B to C. Then you learn the transition from A, B, and C from every direction, and then you learn D. And you start from this very small thing of like understanding a concept fully, understanding another concept, cross-training, understanding a new concept, cross-training. Eventually, what happens is every single piece connects to every single piece, like a neural network, where everything is cross-referenced against each other, and you are able to do any combination of any movement in any order. So you reach a level of mastery, and the goal of this system is from the very beginning to reach a level of mastery. And it has a steep learning curve. So in the beginning, it seems like it's slower. If someone is training the traditional way and someone is training this way, the person training the traditional way will seem like they're improving. But the person who's training the traditional way will plateau, and this system never plateaus. It just keeps going and going. So it starts improving exponentially to a point where you just start improving faster and faster and faster.
That's so cool. I definitely want to learn. You're kind of blowing my mind right now with all these like, I didn't think I was going to get into like a self-help like conversation, but this is like such an amazing conversation. I'm so happy that like we got connected, because I just feel like there's so much of more of your story to tell, and you're still so young. Like I'm 40 years old. You're probably like 37. So 36. Like, so I think of myself as getting older, but really it's just beginning. And like to see you grow as a person and as a actor, as a performer, as just like as a master, like I can't wait to see what more comes from you, Dmitrious. It's so cool that it started here in little Spokane, it's in a sort of way. And I really appreciate your time. I really want to, I really want to have you on again someday, but I will hopefully see you at Lilac City Comic Con. And I should say, like, how can people find you and like all the things that you're doing? Like, is there one space for people to find you, or what's the best way?
So I've tried to not be found.
Okay.
I had to take a break from the internet. I really did. It was a very toxic place, especially post Kenobi, when I was trying to receive credit for the work that I had done.
Yeah.
It was just very dark. It was just very dark. And in the end, what I realized was I had to distance myself and just focus on my immediate reality, my close friends, the people who actually care about me, the people who are around me, the people who I want to help, and reach out individually.
Yeah.
And so for me now, I took a break from social media for about 6 months. I started posting again. You could find me on social media, my personal social media at Dmit2K on Instagram, or Darth Dmitrious on Instagram. Darth Dmitrious is just for Darth Vader stuff. Dmit2K is going to be a bunch of circus and juggling and whatever I'm working on, philosophy, whatever. There's little bits and pieces, but for the most part, I'm an introvert, so I like to be around people, but I like to be in my own space with a notebook, having ideas, workshopping them, creating stuff. That's kind of where my happy place is. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Well, I look forward to meeting you in person on June 1st, June 2nd, Lilac City Comic Con. Again, I thank you for giving me 2 hours of your time to talk about all you've been doing and how you got to where you're at. And I always do end the podcast on one final question, and it's a little bit harder to have it relate just because you haven't been in Spokane for 20 years. But the question I always end on is, why Spokane?
So I was in Spokane because I grew up in Spokane.
Right.
But I think it's been 14 years. 14 years since I moved. But why Spokane was all the reasons I said before. Spokane is a very beautiful place. You have so much going for you. You have 4 seasons. The winter is rough. I moved to California because I hated the winter. But you can never replicate sledding down Manitou Hill on the first snow on like a snow skate and just having the whole community come out and just sled at the park. That's something I haven't been able to find or recapture anywhere in the world. The experience of going to Lake Coeur d'Alene or any of the lakes every summer and having volleyball, having a lake to swim in. I lived in Florida for a while, having a body of water where there's no crocodiles that you could just swim in. That you could just jump in and swim in.
Totally.
Right? Being able to walk to the river, walk in nature, having a track around the river, around nature to jog is the greatest thing ever. Having a lot of cliffs to climb. And now Spokane is becoming bigger, and there's more of a hip hop scene. There's more of a gymnastics scene. There's my friend Tucker Fry opened up a new parkour gym in Spokane. So there's parkour, there's hip hop, there's photography, there's a lot of stuff underground, but you have to look for it, which makes it more special. On the surface level, Spokane is another town like any other town. There's some strip malls, there's a couple outlet stores, whatever. If you look at the superficial. But if you look deep down, there's this underlying culture. There's Spokast. There's this subculture that exists, but only for those who want to look for it, who are willing to find it. Yeah.
I love that. That is very, very, very true. Well, Dmitrious, this has been an honor and a pleasure. Thank you again for coming on Spokast, and to everyone else, thank you for listening. Go to Lilac City Comic Con June 1st, June 2nd at the Spokane Convention Center. Dmitrious will be there. He'll be doing a lightsaber performance and doing a Q&A panel. And so go and see him, and go and support him too at his booth. And again, thank you, Dmitrious, and thank you all for listening. Until next time, peace.
I started doing these things that made them say they can't do it like that, y'all. Hell no, they can't do it like that, y'all. Hell no, they can't do it like that, y'all. Hell no, they can't do it like that. Hold up. Without a day, hey, somebody better tell Ellen that I'm on the way. Somebody tell Charlamagne, hey, I'm on the way. There ain't a stage in this world that I couldn't play. Coachella with a full live band would make sense. DJ sets at Summer Jam makes sense. We just getting friendly, people, so it'll make sense soon. I hope soon, sooner than later. contemplating my life if I never make it. I'd only know when I'm on the bed, dying to 80. I'm that dedicated.